And so everything I did was people first. And I was a single mom, so half of that was necessity of like, I got to make this work so I can be at work and be a mom. But I was like, so other people have lives too. So how do we come together and work together in a way that we can like live our lives and be successful in all of the things? We go to work and we have all of these people say, I need your best ideas. I need you to be creative. We need to innovate. The only way we can stay ahead is to innovate. But don't do the number one thing that's going to allow you to be creative and innovate. We're walking around with all of the shoulds that have been put on us. Oh, I should sound like this. I should say this. This is what should be said. This is what this person should want to hear. Like, and we forget, like, but what is my voice really saying? Leaders don't have all the answers, but leaders ask the best questions.
Today's guest is Corean Canty, an executive coach, speaker, and CEO with over 20 years of experience leading high-growth teams and designing award-winning workplace cultures across startups and global brands. She co-founded Shift to Play, where she helps organizations unlock creativity and innovation through the science of play. She's also a TEDx speaker coach, a catalyst coach for thought leaders, and a fierce advocate for authentic leadership rooted in clarity, communication, and courage. You're gonna love our conversations. We start talking about grief and things that we wish we had known before we started caring for those elderly and individuals that are struggling in life. And then we move through talking about amazing opportunities to bring play into work and into your life. We also share a couple of our bucket list things. And then, of course, you're going to love our speed questions at the end. So before you forget, take a moment to click that subscribe button wherever you're watching or listening. Are you ready? Join me, Angela Gill-Nelms, for today's episode of the Badass Leaders Podcast. Each week, I go deep with fearless leaders who tell it like it is. The wins, the heartbreaks, and the hard lessons that shape real growth. Let's dig in and get ready to unlock your full badass potential. Welcome to AGN Studios. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, so we know each other, but the audience does not know you. So why don't we kick off with this? Okay. Tell us just an intro about you. And then we're going to dig into the work that you do and put a little teasers along the way about some of the fun things that you do in that. Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah.
Okay,
great,
let's do it.
Great. So I'm Corean Canty. I spent 20 years in media marketing advertising, former COO. Now I spend my time bringing play to work and helping executives and founders find their voice and amplify it is the super, super short version of career life. I'm also a mom of two, and I take care of my mom, which is like becoming a mom all over again.
It is. It's interesting, the circle of life too, and how challenging it is to be a caregiver at various stages of your life because the needs are unique. And also we know that our loved ones, especially the elder loved ones, hate the fact that they have to ask for help. Right.
Well, yeah, and it's like we understand it because we're adults and we're like, we know we can do things.
Right.
And the difference is, and I was a single mom my whole career, so I raised my kids with me, just me, and it's very different when you have an actual 3-year-old and then when you have an adult who, like my mother has dementia and she loses some mobility, but they still kind of revert back to that, like, I don't want to do this, but they also know that they used to be able to do everything. And it frustrates them that they can't do it anymore. And so it's like a whole nother dynamic nobody prepares you for. Yeah,
exactly. There are no classes or anything for this.
There's not enough conversation about it either.
Yeah, I think so too, because I was judging a competition for an innovation for a project. I think it was at UVA. Okay. And something that one of the teams had was it was an education and an app resource for caregivers. And I was just talking about knowing, for example, my aunt and uncle who were the primary caregivers for her 95-year-old mother who lived with them and my grandmother that passed away just shy of 102.
Oh, wow.
So both of their mothers lived with them. They were primary caregivers for them. And the amount, I mean, it's a 24/7 job. And they don't get the support. We don't talk about it. I mean, you know, there's just so much of that needs to have more of a conversation.
I agree.
What would you say for you going into this? What you just talked about was one hard piece of it. What's another thing that is really kind of surprising that you would want somebody who is about to go into this venture to know ahead of time? Like something you wish you had known?
That there's a real thing called anticipatory grief.
Oh.
And I think that's the part that I think nobody tells you about or prepares you for. So, I mean, we all have various different relationships with our parents or people that we may end up taking care of when they're elderly. Regardless of that, you still know this person, who they were your whole life.
Yes.
And when they're dealing with things where their brain or their body no longer works and you're kind of watching them revert back or you're kind of watching them be less of who they are, there's a grief there because you're already losing the person even though they're still here. And you know that we know what life is. We're all going to die one day. None of us really know when it is. But you know when someone's elderly or they're older that there's a limited time there. And so it becomes very real. And it's something that you don't think about beforehand, that you start to feel the grief before you think the grief is going to come.
And I think too is that you're starting to experience it, you're not expecting it, and the world doesn't understand it.
Right.
So that to me, so my first child was stillborn, and I experienced a different a type of grief that the rest of the world didn't understand because they didn't see that child as a child. And so they, I also had an instance later in life of the falling out with both of my brothers, one of whom used to be my best friend and went from talking constantly to no longer being and it was like
That's
a death.
a form of grief. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And we live with grief so much, we don't realize how much we live with grief. Like even when there's any change in our life, we get a new job, we move somewhere new, even if it's a good change, the person we were before that change happened no longer exists. And they had like a vision of the future that no longer exists. So there's a form of grief there. Like you have to let go of what you used to think was, or you used to think what was going to be, and learn how to live with like this new what is and what you think is going to be, because it's probably going to change again. Right. And so I think we talk a lot about how change is hard in all different areas of life, but I don't think we talk about why and the grief related to having kind of like forced change that you weren't prepared for.
Right. And I think too, going back to especially parents that have dementia, or I recall, for example, when my aunt was passing away of colorectal cancer, the impact of the drugs on her overall personality was so significant. And that was a major takeaway that I recall, was that I wasn't expecting that. And I think that's one of the real tragedies of cancer treatment is when that happens and the loved ones, their final memories are of an individual who's in incredible pain, that is taking all these medications, not all the amazing memories that you had from when they were super healthy and their best self.
Yeah. And it's like, this is happening to so many people now around me, and especially like with our age group. Our world has gotten less healthy. We know we have so many things affecting our health. People are getting sicker earlier. People are having all these things happen. And we're still in the middle of trying to figure out, how do we prepare for the second half of our lives? Where are we at in our careers? A lot of us have children who are grown, and we have all these different transitions going on. And I think what this experience has taught me the most, which I've leaned into for the last several years since I first moved my mom in to start taking care of her, is how real end-of-life regrets are. Because I also watched my mom have her end-of-life regrets. Like there's things I know my mother wanted to do and she has missed the opportunity, right? There's things it's not going to happen in this lifetime because she never gave herself the chance, or she never took the risk, or she always put it off, or she did everything for everyone else, or she just didn't believe that she could, and now she can't. And we talk a lot about, and we have a lot of sayings of like, it's never too late, it's never too late. But there is a too late. Like there's a time when your brain and your body can no longer do things. So she can still dream and want to do things. It's never too late for that. But there is a time when it's actually too late to do. And so that's why I started my podcast a few years ago called Remember to Live, because of that, because I was like, I want to live right now. I don't want to be like so many people who end up with end of life regrets. And I want to be like at the end, like, well, I did that. It might have sucked, but I did it, like I did that and that turned out great. Right. Like I took the chances and I had the experiences and I'm like, you know what? I tried it. I did it. I lived for myself.
I mean, I went skydiving and then spent the next 3 hours puking because I had such bad motion sickness.
Well, that one's not on my bucket list.
Okay, well, just saying, if it is,
yeah,
make sure you take lots of Dramamine. I did not.
I would have not thought about that. And I get motion sickness very quickly.
Me
so
too.
I would not have thought about that.
So, Corinne, here's the thing is they send you this information ahead of time and tell you the things to do. And one of the things that it mentioned was taking motion sickness medication. Okay. I thought it was because we were going up in a small plane and some people have issues with that. Mm-hmm. And at that point I was doing a lot of private pilot lessons and I was like, I'm not worried about that at all. No, it is because when the parachute opens, you start swaying, but the earth remains appearing as if it's still. I've
never talked to anybody this deep about, like, I know people who've skydived, but nobody's ever said that. And it's like, oh, I definitely don't want to do it.
They might be more badass than me, but now the photos and video I got, I look really badass.
Yeah.
But on the inside,
which,
how much
but you did it though.
I did do it.
You did it, and you're like, you'll never have the what if, right?
Right. Yeah, that is a big key. Another thing, and I love because you walked into my home and you saw my live your dash quote.
Yes.
And I have a link to it on my website, and it ties to your podcast is that, those, and you just never know. In fact, today was the funeral. One of my dear friends lost his son suddenly last week. And this morning was his funeral.
Sorry to hear that.
My daughter's grandmother, who was an amazing grandmother to all of her grandkids and an amazing mother, she just passed away last night. So we start thinking, and all of our guests, like, please stay. This is not going to be a depressing episode. I promise you.
But life,
important
right?
conversations to have, right?
Yeah.
Right. So one of the things I was thinking as my aunt and uncle went through everything they did with my grandmother that I really wish they had called in hospice help sooner because they were just killing themselves. I mean, getting torn muscles, trying to move her and all of these things, right? And then just all the things that you can imagine a 102-year-old woman would have challenges with. Yeah. And then when they finally brought in hospice, they brought in a legit bed. They brought it, someone came a couple of times a week and bathed her and those types of things. I really wish they had done that sooner.
Yeah. And isn't that like such a lesson for so many different things, especially as women leaders and women running households that accept the help?
Yes.
Right? We don't have to do it all ourselves. We don't have to take on all the weight, but there's so many. I mean, I'm still learning that lesson. That's still a hard lesson for me. And I'm sitting here watching, and I'm even learning it with my mom who I'm standing in front of her and she's trying to do something she can't do. And I'm like, Mom, I'm standing right here. Why don't you ask me to help? And it's like, oh, okay. You learn these lessons through all these different parallel things that are happening in life.
Yes. And I think too, in this example, and my aunt listens to this podcast, so she's going to hear me say this, but one of the things I was very frustrated that I really wanted them to get help in is because going back to you only live once, and I didn't want such a significant part of their life to be 24/7 caregivers for my grandmother. Now they did sign on and promise they weren't going to put her in a nursing home, and so they did do that. But I think too, it goes back to us being nurturing and caregiving, and also feel like we have an obligation. When I think sometimes there's a way to take a step back, and this goes back to women leadership and building companies and being responsible to your shareholders and all of these things. There's a time to take a step back and say, okay, wait, but am I killing another piece of something?
Yes.
By following what I thought was the right recipe? And is there something that maybe I should give myself more grace?
Yes.
And take a different path?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. This is fascinating. Okay. Now we're going to get into more motivational stuff, but I'm not afraid of just one final thing that I want to say in this. I'm not afraid to talk about death. I'm not afraid to die because I really feel like I've lived a great life. And I think that's what we both want other people to be able to say. I want
everyone to feel like that.
Right?
Right? Like we get this one like big, beautiful life. And if for some reason we get other lives, we don't know. We don't remember them. So we get this one big, beautiful life. So we have to live it. Like I'm always telling people, you have to put the living into making a living. That's the whole point. If we're not doing the living part, then what are we really doing?
Okay, now I know exactly. I'm glad we did that because now I know exactly where I want to go next with you. Okay, because what do we spend the majority of our, I don't know, you know the percentage of time we spend working and how many people say they hate their job. And so I have plenty of episodes that also talk to people who've made huge pivots in their lives because there's like, I hate I've done that myself as well. And yet, you know, a secret sauce about how to bring joy, creativity, innovation, collaboration into the workforce.
Yes.
So I'm doing a little teaser here, right? But you know the secret sauce in it. And so before you tell us really what it is, tell us a little bit about what encouraged you to make the shift in your life from being a corporate COO into the work you do now.
Yeah. So I spent, like I said, many, many years in corporate. And even before I took a break from corporate, I had always put people first, but not me first, right? Like I cared a lot. I think I actually even got my success because I was thought about the people in the roles, the person who was my client, not the company. And so everything I did was people first. And I was a single mom. So half of that was necessity of like, I got to make this work so I can be at work and be a mom. But I was like, so other people have lives too. So how do we come together and work together in a way that we can like live our lives and be successful in all of the things? And I got burnt out because I felt like I always had to be there because I cared about all the people. And then I was trying to do all the things as a mom. And I got really sick to the point where I was like updating my will for my kids because I didn't know what was going to happen. And I realized in that moment while I'm like laying in bed with the Zoom video off because I'm afraid that they need me at work or that something's going to happen or I'm not going to be there for them. But yet I'm telling them, make sure you take your time off so you don't get sick. And they're like, but you're not, but you're not. And I did a lot of things at work to like help make work better. I studied a lot of well-being things. I'm a professional improviser. I've done improv comedy for many, many years. So I'd always bring improv to work. And I got sick right around the time that COVID happened. And I think part of the reason that it all caught up to me, because I did not have COVID, was because COVID eliminated the things that were keeping me well.
Oh, tell me more.
And the things that were keeping me well was play, because I do improv practice. And I had a dance class every Saturday. And I would like have time with my friends, and I'd have this time to release and reset my nervous system. And I was going to yoga and I was breathing. And when everything got shut down and we were just in the house and I no longer got to go play and I no longer got to go dance and move my body and reset my nervous system, because once I was in the house, I didn't make time for that in the house. I like had to leave the house to go do it in order for me to not look at my computer and the work that was in the house, right?
Right.
And when all of the stuff that I was doing to stay well went away, my body was done. And so I realized then like the importance of these things. And so I worked really hard to get well again and still stayed in corporate for a few years, took another job thinking that was this, like, I'll go do this new thing and it will be better and I'll take better care of myself. And it's, all the things we tell ourselves.
The grass is definitely green on the other side, right?
And, it was just as equally as stressful. And then my mom started getting sicker and I moved her in and I started feeling some of my symptoms come back. And I realized like, oh, none of this is worth my health. Because if I don't have my health, then it doesn't matter. Like I can't take care of anybody. I can't help anybody if I can't even get out of bed. And so I decided to take a break. And so I took a break. And as I took a break, a lot of people that had worked for me would come to me and be like, hey, I need help because I feel like I'm burning out. And so I started doing a lot of coaching, but also realized people would ask me to come back to the companies I worked at. Can you come back and do improv? Can you come back and do some of these workshops? Because like we need it. Our teams are trying to figure out how to reimagine what we do after this pandemic thing. And that kind of kicked off the things that I've been doing for the last few years.
I love this. Okay, so now we're going to go straight into what it is that you do. So a couple of things, right? Because I know as well, you help people, I think at a core, tell amazing stories that can be impactful. And that is one way. And then you help people stay healthy by integrating this into play into work.
Yes.
So kick us into it and tell us more about what you do.
Yeah. So right now I have two businesses. One is called Shift to Play. I have an amazing co-founder. His name is Yoshi. We've been doing improv together for probably close to 15 years. And when he took a break from corporate, it's something where we both used play at work and saw what it did. And we had for probably like 10 years talked about we should do this like at more companies, but we just were too busy working clearly and like living life. But we even looked back and saw like we wrote a note like 10 years before we actually started the business that we should do it. And then when we both were kind of taking a break, we said, well, let's just do this. And we started reaching out to people who we've worked with before, and it became a whole business of going into organizations and building these custom play sessions that help with many things like teamwork and collaboration, but also creativity and innovation. And we're seeing how that's even more important right now as AI is taking over everything. Like, how do we keep our human innovation and creativity? Because that's what allows us to use AI in the best way. And I actually started out doing more like executive life design coaching when I first left corporate. I'm certified in a bunch of well-being kind of woo things as well. And I've just basically spent my whole time as a leader coaching internally and developing leaders because that's my favorite thing to do. But I'm always like life first. Like when I was a COO, people would come to me, they'd be like, go put your time on Corean's calendar and just ask her about life. It like became like this like thing in the company. And people come to me like, well, and the first thing they would say is like, well, I want to get this title, or I want to get, I want to make it this money. And I said, well, how do you want to spend your days? And they're like, how do you want to spend your days? Because like, that's where life happens. And I'd give them homework to go like think about things and then come back to me. And I'd say, well, now I want you to negotiate with me. So you're getting something out of this work in the same way the company's getting something out of you. Like you need to be working towards things that you want in your life. And so a lot of people came to me after I was no longer just there and accessible and asked me to help them think about their next steps. I ended up doing a TEDx on play because I think it's so important. And I fell in love with just the process in like bringing big ideas to life. And so I also coach for TEDx now. And that kind of transitioned my coaching into a lot of people then coming to me like, well, oh, I have this big idea, or I have this story I want to tell. And because I've been on stage telling stories as an improviser for many, many years, in these last couple of years in the job market and just in the world, people are realizing like, I actually need to be visible. I need to know how to talk about myself. I need to know how to tell my story. Leaders need to know how to communicate and tell the story of why in a way that people understand, because there's so much change now and it's so rapid that we have to get back to the one thing that humans understand the most in that story.
I love this. And I love the push right now for storytelling. And when I work with the teams that in medical innovation, when I talk to them about presenting to VC or something like that, I'm like, look, here's I want you to start with heart, then facts, then heart.
Yes.
Like you have to say, you have to make me care. And the best way for people to understand is through storytelling. Now tell us a little bit, because and we will include a link to the TEDx in the show notes on play, but tell us a little bit about maybe the science behind play. Like what is it that play does in the work environment that makes a difference? Because I know there are a lot of executives out there that are like, wait, we don't have time to play. Yes. We need to make revenue and we need to, all of these other things they think they need to do. And play is a waste of time. Only Silicon Valley startups that have slides and, whatever do play, and they don't understand the value. But I know there's a lot of science and research behind it.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I also just did a Disrupt HR talk this year on play as well that addresses that exact thing of like there's no time to play. And you have to think about the fact that like you cannot become a functional adult without play. So as a child, you need play to be able to become a fully functioning adult. It's our first learning tool. And as we grow up, we think everything stops when we stop like getting taller. But our brain never stops growing. We can continually make new connections. And the number one way to do that is through play. It's still the best learning tool for our brains. It's still the way that we learn how to do everything, right? And we go to work and we have all of these people say, I need your best ideas. I need you to be creative. We need to innovate. The only way we can stay ahead is to innovate. But don't do the number one thing that's going to allow you to be creative and innovate, because it's only going to come through play. And a lot of people think of play in different ways, but really play is, how do we allow ourselves to be in the moment and be present and allow ourselves to use our imagination and just go wherever it takes us, right? We get so boxed in as we become adults. We get told, you can't play, you need to be responsible, you have to do it this way, this is the only way. And we lose our ability to expand our mind and to think of new things. And I think it's even more important now because AI can do amazing things. Technology can do amazing things, but it all stems from our human inputs.
Oh, yes.
It can't create something that doesn't exist.
Right.
Our brain can. Our brain can dream up things that don't exist. But AI can take all the things that we've dreamed up and do amazing things with it. But the human imagination and human creativity and human innovation is even more important now that we have tools that can help us do many of the repeatable tasks that we would spend a lot of our brain power on. And now we can do a lot of higher level thinking, a lot of creative thinking, a lot of critical thinking. And the number one way to sharpen that muscle is to play.
Can you share an example of perhaps someone that was really resistant to this idea and then they experience, because I know when you go into an environment, you have the people who are super excited and the other people who are really annoyed their boss told them they had to do this day, right? So can you share some
Well, I'll
examples?
actually give you an example. One of our favorite clients, we had a person that I knew who brought us in, and she was like, you have to bring them in to do kind of a team building exercise. And she's a surgeon, and she admittedly at the end of our session said out loud, and I know she'll be okay with me sharing this. She was like, you know what? When I was told to fly this team in from Atlanta to do this thing, I was like, why are we doing this? Like, we could just, like, why are we paying the money for this? And she was like, but now I get it. Mm-hmm. And we went on to do a whole engagement with her team over a year's time, and we kept using play to help with challenges that they may have been having as a team, or to help them innovate, to help them imagine what they wanted the future of their team to be like, to learn how to communicate better. And it's became such a great relationship, and we were able to do so many amazing things with that team. But she admitted, she was like, I just didn't know why we were doing this, right? And she's like, but now, after seeing what happened with my team in just 2 hours, I see the power of it.
So give us some example. What are some play things that you do?
Yeah. So here's the thing that I think people don't recognize a lot about play. And so we do a lot of improv because we're improvisers, and it's fun and it's easy and you don't need a lot of tools. But it's simple things like we do something called the name game, where everyone says their name and has to do a body movement, and it feels weird and silly, but you learn about each other. You'll learn something. You see something about personality, and so many teams have done that, and then they start starting their team calls with the movements, and like it becomes a fun thing. One of the tools that we use a lot, and it's very simple, is just playing like a simple word association game, which is just like thinking about whatever word comes off the top of your head based on the word the person said before you. Okay. As adults who've been in corporate for a long time, that can be very hard because we always want the right answer. We want the right word, the perfect word. It's hard for us to just be free and spontaneous. But when we're playing this game and we're realizing, why is this so hard if someone says red, and I'm like, well, and I think blue, but I don't want to say blue because it's blue.
I thought apple when you said that.
But that's the whole point. And everyone says, and then you realize, but because when you said it, you thought something, so everyone else in the room thought something too. And they're like, well, you said that, and then you said, oh, we actually think different. So you start to see thought diversity. And then what we do is we have these like power questions we do in between games. So we have the games, they're just fun. It's kind of nonsense things, but you see each other in a way. When you're laughing, the masks come down.
Yes.
And you start to recognize, wait, I have assumptions and I have bias based off of the fact that I think everyone thinks like me. But
because everyone doesn't hear red and think
right.
apple.
But it's such a safe way to see bias.
Yes.
It's such a safe way to see
yes.
We think different. And then you can start thinking about, so what do you think happens in a meeting when you're thinking that they're thinking apple, but it's orange and nobody's communicating clearly what it is, and we're not asking, or we're just, making decisions off of assumptions, right? And so then they have these ahas that become very tangible that they can take back to work. But they also got to laugh and connect with their friends, because laughing with another human is one of the best ways to bond with someone.
Yes, yes.
It's one of the best ways to reset our nervous system and to get rid of the stress. And so we should laugh a lot more at work.
I could not agree more.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that. Now I can't stop thinking red, because I was also kind of like, okay, well, red could also be stop, or you could say red
Everyone
and green.
probably
Like,
thinks there's very few
know,
times that we think alike. And then
Yes.
there's games where we're trying to get to the same word, and it's just fun and so awakening at the same time.
Well, and I think too, I'm right now binging Top Chef, and one of the things they do sometimes is they'll do the competition where they'll put a wall between and you have to describe. It's kind of like the telephone wire thing, right? And it also reminds me, we think we are communicating clearly.
Yes.
And yet it's not being received by the other person. So can you tell me a little bit, because part of your coaching with TEDx has to be coaching, I assume, coaching the individual to actually understand what they're really communicating when they say these things, and how to communicate it in a way so that the intended message gets across. So tell me a little bit more about your thoughts and process for that.
Yeah. So my other company, Speak More Human, really leans into that. And everything that I do starts with, do you know your own voice? Because most of us are walking around with our should voice. We're walking around with all of the shoulds that have been put on us. Oh, I should sound like this. I should say this. This is what should be said. This is what this person should want to hear. Like, and we forget, like, but what is my voice really saying?
Yes.
What is even my,
I just got chills just hearing this. I love this.
What is even my why? Why am I doing this? Like, sometimes we don't know our own whys. We're so busy shooting all the time that we don't know our own whys. And so whether I'm talking to and working with a leader who's trying to lead change in their organization, and they think they're being very clear, and nobody knows what's going on, and everybody's like, we don't know why we're doing this, and nobody does anything because it doesn't make any sense, because we didn't take the time to slow down and get clear, even at a leadership level. Are we all clear at this table before we go try to make the whole company do this? Do we all think this the same way? Are we speaking the same language? And most of the time it's no, if we didn't take the time to do it. And it's even more important when I'm working with my speakers, especially when you want to do a TEDx, because TEDx is a very different stage, not just because it's TEDx and like the authority or the prestige or glamour that comes with that stage. But there's so many people that I've worked with who were doing their first TEDx, and they may have been on TV for a long time, and they've been on stages, and they've spoken in front of thousands and thousands of people. It's very different when you're doing a talk or you're speaking in front of people and it's about your company, or it's about something, or you're like on the news, or you're speaking about a very particular topic because that's what your work is.
Right.
When you have to find your big idea, because TED is very much not about it's not just a motivational speak. It's not trying to sell something. It's, do you have an idea that will make people think? Do you have an idea that will spark conversation? Like, do you have an idea that's worth talking about and making people think differently and think and look at our world differently? And we all have them, but we have to take the time to get clear on what it is, because we all have these lived experiences. We have these beautiful lived experiences that teach us different things. And many times we are mirrors for each other, and our perspective can help us see things different that we might not see for ourselves. So I do a lot of work with, like, even when people come to me and they have their idea and they've booked the stage, and I'm like, okay, but how much of this even is still, you're saying it because you think it should be said this way? Like, what are you holding back? What lived experience are you not allowing to be in this? Are you clear? If you had to tell someone what this idea was in one sentence, can you? Because
which is so hard.
It's very hard.
It's
very hard because it takes self-work.
Yeah.
And many times we don't slow down enough to check in with ourselves to even start to do the self-work.
Which I think is why I'm a big advocate of your understanding your personal brand and your personal voice. Mm-hmm. And once again, not the brand that you think the world thinks you should have, but the brand because when you see people and they have a brand and you see it and you're just like, yes, that is Angela or that is Corinne, right? then and I think one reason I think is so important for leaders is because the people we're collaborating with should really expect the way we're going to respond to things, right?
Yes.
It makes me so happy when someone says, "Oh, that sounds just like something Angela would say."
Yes.
Because it's just me. And also I find if you're not being authentic to yourself, you haven't done that self-work to find who you are, and you're living a fake life, then you start having cracks in that. And you even when someone says, "Oh, that sounds just like you," sometimes I find for the people who haven't done the self-work, it takes them back. They're like, "Well, that's not me."
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it is, because that's the way you're portraying, but you haven't figured out that you're portraying as a should versus who you are.
Well, and one of the best ways to know it is like, because it's exhausting.
Yes.
It's exhausting waking up and never being you, right? It's exhausting.
So many people do that.
We do. And like being you is what makes you so unique. It's like, that's the secret. The secret sauce is you. Because there's only one you. There's only one person who's lived every experience that you've lived, that was born where you're born, that grew up how you grew up, that had the work experiences that you had, that had the relationships that you had, that saw things or didn't see things or whatever. And all of that added up together, plus like what you believe in, what your values are, all of these things make you have this very unique perspective. But if you bury that perspective and you're just copying what you think should be said, then there's people out there who are waiting to hear your perspective. There's sparks that can be ignited in other people and in organizations and in the world because they're waiting to hear your voice. And that doesn't mean that everyone has to get everything, because that's the other side of it for me is everybody don't deserve all of you.
Right.
So there's a difference between finding your voice and being you and then just being an open book and letting everybody have access to everything about you. No, everybody doesn't deserve all of me. Right. We do have to have discernment in our lives of like what we do with our energy and who gets access to us. But I'm still the same person in any room that I'm in. I get to choose who gets how much of me versus, who doesn't. And I think that that's very important. But especially when we're leaders, if you don't believe yourself or if you don't know yourself and you have all these people counting on you to have a clear vision, counting on you to set the tone, counting on you to pave the way so we can all be successful and we can all build this amazing thing, whatever it is that we're trying to build. But you're not clear. And you wake up in the morning not sure about like what to say or what the vision is, or you've lost your why, or you've boxed yourself in and you're afraid to say the thing that you really want to say. Then work becomes not great for everybody.
Right. Because it feeds into the rest of everyone you're around.
Yes.
And you can tell, like when you're at dinners with people that are like work dinners, and you can tell the people who are having fun and engaging. And even I was at a great work dinner this week, and some brilliant people, and we were challenging each other's ideas at various things dealing with AI, right?
Yeah.
And it was great because there was that healthy piece of tension.
Mm-hmm.
There was conflict. There were different thoughts. There were biases. You could also see some people hearing what someone said and then taking a step back and thinking about it and then giving their perspective. I mean, it was so dynamic and so amazing. And then you have the dinners that are very expected, and everyone's saying what they expect the person, and they're having this small talk, and they're not really digging into who they are.
Yeah.
When you look at the two of those, which one would you rather hang out with?
Yeah, I want to be in the one where like, let's challenge some ideas. Let's come up with something new. Let's think outside the box, right? Like, I want people to challenge my thinking. I don't want to just fit in and be in the box and always be safe, because then change isn't happening for real. Like, real change isn't happening. Real change comes out of discomfort, and it comes out of challenging the status quo, and it comes out of like, okay, just because we always did it this way, does it mean we should still do it this way? And there's a lot of that we're seeing now being disrupted, and it can feel very painful for a lot of people. But if you lean into it and you understand like, oh, that means we just get to build something new. That means like, let's get more voices in this, because we're going to get better ideas and ideas that we didn't think of. And I think that that's the part where, like, for example, earlier in my career, I did account strategy for the first half of my career. And I led some of the biggest accounts like Walmart, Target, Home Depot, like the big, huge like agency accounts. And the reason that I was able to grow those accounts so much wasn't because I had all the answers, because I didn't really have any of the answers. It's I knew how to ask the right questions of enough different people across all of my teams, across all of their teams, that we could start to understand, like, well, where is the real pain? And what do you really need? And what problems really need to be solved? Because we can work really hard all day and not even be solving any problems that matter.
Right. Yes. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Okay, let's dig a little bit into storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe maybe what your definition of storytelling is to someone who the concept of integrating storytelling into all their lines of communication is foreign?
Mm-hmm.
Because I really think storytelling is starting to come on trend right now. You're
Yeah.
hearing a lot more about it, but we didn't 3 to 5 years ago, right? It's really come into a forefront now. But I also still believe, most of the people in this audience that listen to this podcast are somewhere between the age of like early 30s to mid 40s. And so I think a lot of those individuals are wondering, well, what do they really mean by storytelling? So can you share a little bit on your thoughts for that?
Yeah, the one thing I have a lot of conversations about is the fact that as human beings, story has been our mode of meaning since the beginning of time. Before we had written word, before we had all of these different ways to communicate, we orally told stories to each other to learn lessons, to understand how to do things. Like, story is humans' mode of meaning. So if you take the story out of it and you wonder why people aren't understanding what's happening, what's meaning, the quickest way to get someone to grasp a concept or an idea is to wrap it in a story that allows them to connect the dots, that can feel relatable, to use metaphor, to use something that happens in our everyday lives so we can understand. And we're engaged. Like, we stop and are engaged. Like, if you just put a bunch of numbers on the screen and put up a spreadsheet, people are going to glance at it and they're going to not be engaged. But if you start to tell a story of like, well, what's the origin? What does this mean? How does this impact people? Why are we even doing this? People start to put the dots together and listen and engage. And we forget that, like, everything that we do all day long is story. We are watching TV, that story. We're listening to the radio, that story. We're scrolling to social media. We're engaged the most in people's stories. Reality TV came so big because we're like, ooh, what's happening in that life? What's that story? Whether it's real or fake. Soap operas, like think about all these things that have existed, and stories just went from, like radio to TV to streaming to YouTube to podcasts to
books.
That's the original story, right? Like, it's the original story. And if you're not reading real books anymore, you really should, because it's really good for your brain to actually read the words. But if you want to be an impactful leader, regardless of what you're leading, because when I say leader, I don't just mean like a people manager in a company, because everyone can lead from where they are. If you're someone who wants to have a voice and have impact, whether you're a CEO of a company or whether you're leading your household, understanding the why, understanding the origin of what you're talking about, learning how to connect the dots, learning how to tell a story about it so people can connect with it, is going to create meaning, and people are then going to be able to absorb it and integrate it better than if you're just saying, do this thing with no context, no why, no meaning, no modes of engagement, because story leads to real conversation.
Yeah. And I think too, well, one thing is understanding your audience when you're crafting your stories as well, because there are cultural differences within stories. But the thing that I love as well about storytelling is we talked earlier about like red is stop, apple, blue, green, all these types of stuff, right? But if you're trying to describe something to someone and you tell in a form of a story that a lot of people can relate to, then they can visually, it translates just words that are being said into picture images as well.
Yes.
So it becomes this visual dynamic. So you're hearing the words, you're visualizing it. You also oftentimes have your own sensations and memories tied to it. So you're basically allowing your audience to now become physically involved in what you're sharing, using all of their senses. And then that's when you can get an impact, because the person who's more visual is going to get an impact. The person who's more tactile, each of these individuals. So now you've crafted something that any audience.
And they'll imagine in their way. Right. They will.
Exactly.
Because when you're telling a story, what do? We always imagine what's next. Right. So even in your example, when we're in a room and someone says like purple and people are like, the number one, why? What made you say purple? Because we want to know the story behind why you think purple. And I thought dinosaur, right? Because there's a story there. Something in your lived experience made you think purple. And that's where the real fun happens, because then people start telling stories about themselves and like why. And then you start to be like, oh, now I understand you better, because you went through this experience that made you think of purple. And so as we continue to work together, it's like, oh, I start to understand who to go to, because now I know how they think, because now I know their background, and now I know how they connect the dots. And then you'll be able to collaborate way better, because you're like, oh, I have this really hard problem with this thing. I'm going to go to Angela because I know she thinks in this way, because I've heard her tell these stories and I see how she connects the dots.
Yeah. This is amazing. Okay, so another thing I wanted to double click on that you said is, I'm a big believer as well that everyone is a leader in some space. And I oftentimes, especially this being Badass Leaders podcast, I'll have people say, oh, well, I'm not a leader. And I just want to pause and say, you have the opportunity. Like, a leader does not mean you have to be an executive or you have to be on stage or you have to own a business. It doesn't mean any of those things, right? So what would you give? Because one of the questions we like to ask is what people think the difference between a leader and a manager is. But tell us what your definition then, in addition to what you already said earlier, is about leadership.
Well, a manager, like, you manage things, you manage people, you manage resources, you manage you're putting things together. You know, a leader is someone who has a vision, who has an idea, who has a voice, and you're not afraid to speak up. And you're not afraid to put the vision out there. And you're not afraid to be the first person to take the first step or take an action. It doesn't mean you have to have a certain title or you have to have direct reports or anything. It's just, I'm brave enough to be the one to say what I see, to say the idea, to give a solution. Because, I mean, if you even think back to like, go watch kids on a playground. There's naturally going to be leaders on the playground, because there's the kids who are like, oh, this game's not working. It's not fun. Let's go do something else. Right. Because they see it and they say it, and then they offer up something else to do. And so leadership happens from the time that we can walk and talk. It's just, like you said, do you see yourself as a leader? Because you can lead from where you are in any situation that you're in. And the world needs a lot more leaders right now.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of problems that need to be solved. There's a lot of people who need help. And there's some people who their life situations make it almost impossible for them to see a way out. We just need people who are willing to, like, let's lift up our heads and look around and see where can we make the world a little bit better in whatever little square of the world we're in.
Let's talk a little bit about, because one piece of leadership as well, you were talking about bravery. And that ties into conflict resolution. So let's talk a little bit about your philosophy on conflict resolution. And I'm confident you have coached people on conflict resolution before. So give us some tidbits about that.
I think the one thing that makes conflict resolution hard, and it actually gets easier when we work with people with play, because you start to see those biases that we don't normally recognize, right? Because what makes conflict stay is people holding their ground in their own thought, idea, belief system, and not allowing themselves to open up and possibly see the other side, right? Like, just not even being open to it.
Which I think much of that is fear-based.
Yes. A lot of what we do is fear-based, right?
Yes.
And that also then leads to a lot of our health problems, because then we're stressed out and we're fearful all the time, but many of us, there's a lot of places in the world right now that actually have things to really be afraid of. But most of us are like, being afraid of the spreadsheet is not real fear, right? Being afraid that you're going to have a better idea than me and I'm not going to get the promotion is not like real fear. I'm still going to be able to go to bed and wake up tomorrow with something like that. But I think the hardest part is getting past yourself and being open to hearing things that might go against what you believe. And it's not just like a values-based belief. Like a lot of us, it could be, but like what you believe to be true right now. Because for most people, what you believe to be true in the moment isn't based off of you actually asking any questions or getting any information. It's based off of your assumptions and your expectations. And we have a lot of conflicts because people are standing hard on their assumptions and their expectations that are only happening inside their own head. And they never stopped to say, well, let me ask some questions. Even if I don't like it, let me be open, let me listen. Let me not listen to defend myself or listen, because like we're locked and loaded. As soon as the person starts talking, we're not even listening.
Right,
because
we're
just waiting to respond. And we're like, oh, I got my thing. You missed 5 sentences that had the critical information because you're just like, when are you going to stop talking so I can prove my point and win? Like it's always a game, like a battle, right? But if you just push that aside and say, well, what happens if I actually just listen and am open to hearing it? And even if I don't like it, even if it makes me uncomfortable, even if I think it would never work, what happens if I just listen? And this is where one of the number one rule in improv comes in. And what if I actually took a yes and mindset to this thing, even if I don't like it?
Yeah.
And yes and is not yes but, because a lot of people be like, yes, but that's negating.
Yep.
If you say but after yes, you're actually negating whatever the person just said.
Which is one of my favorite coaching that I do with people is when they put that but in there, just to pause and say, no. What if instead you said and?
Yes.
Instead of and. I encourage all the listeners to try that because it changes the whole tone. And when you say that, when you say but, the other person immediately becomes defensive and they're ready.
And,
but when
the conversation is lost.
Exactly. And when you say and, then you get the spirit of curiosity.
Yes.
Which is, I was going to tie into asking you about how do you coach and teach curiosity?
Yes.
Because I think that storytelling and curiosity, I think, are two of the secret sauces we need to lean into heavily right now.
So there's a second kind of part of improv that we learn very early when you do improv. A lot of people are very familiar with yes and. It's kind of become mainstream. But not a lot of people talk about the second part, which is if then. So I'll give you like an example of like an improv scene. So if I walked on stage and said, what a beautiful purple sky we have today. Well, if someone walked on stage and was like, the sky's not purple, that's the but, right? Like,
right.
Then like, where are we going to go with this scene? Now it's already not interesting. The audience is like, well, that sucks. Like, right. But if I was like, oh, this beautiful purple sky, and my partner comes on stage and says, yes, and look at those green unicorns flying around, right? So now they added to my idea, because that's what yes and is. Yes and is take what the person gives you. How do you add to it, right? And so you added to the idea. Now we have this world with purple skies and green unicorns. If the world has purple skies and green unicorns, then what else could be possible in this world? And so that's how we can build really robust scenes in improv, but that's also how you can build really robust connections and ideas in life. That's how you open up your curiosity, right? So if we're trying to solve a problem at work, now we're like, I don't like what you're saying, but okay, well, I'm going to try this yes and thing. And you put the idea out there. I can, with my beautiful human brain, even if I don't like it, find an and to your idea. If I can, we all have amazing imaginations. We can pretend, we pretend a lot all day long with our masks on.
Yep.
So let me pretend I like this thing that you're saying. And if I did like it, what else could I add to it to make it better, right? And so, okay, we're getting somewhere. Now, if this is the world, then what else would have to be true in our workspace, in our office, in the market to make this even better? Like what else could be possible? And that's how we build on the curiosity and start to think outside of the boxes that we've put ourselves in. If we just play the game, let's turn it into a game and play it and take all of our personal feelings and rules out of it and just see what happens on the paper, and amazing things show up.
I love that mindset of let's turn it into a game. One of the things that we do a lot in work is the idea of experiments. Like, okay, you know what? Let's just experiment for the next period of time. And that has its purpose in ways, right? Because then if you say to a team, we're going to experiment with this, then they're more likely to give it a try because they don't feel like if you make this shift, they're committed to it forever. However, let's make it into a game. Is a completely different mindset, and also has a similar approach. Like people are like, oh, well, I kind of want to play a game.
Yeah.
And it appears as if the stakes are then lowered.
Yes.
So your fear of failure, or except for the super competitive people that want to win every game, but
But they still will think in a game mindset, right?
Yeah.
If you think about, and this might be a little, if you're a parent with young kids, but if you think about video games versus real life,
right.
or cartoons versus even like adult cartoons can get away with adult shows that you couldn't with actors, because our brain, if we see a cartoon or a video game, we're like, that's not real. So we will accept way more, whether even if it's like violence or things like that, we will accept way more if we're like, that's not real. It's a game. It's a cartoon. It's a drawing. Right. So if it's not, if we're not talking about this actual work thing, we're like, well, let's turn it into a game. Let's pretend. Let's play. Then our brains, well, that's not real. So I can say whatever I want. I can get my ideas out there, because we're not talking about the real thing. We're playing right now, right? And so there's something that happens where we allow ourselves to use our imagination a little bit more. We allow ourselves to go stretch a little bit further than we might have felt like we were safe to stretch in putting our ideas out there that we might not have said before, because it's just a game. And like, we can come back to the real thing later. Right. But then you realize, oh, all the real solutions came from us being in this space of curiosity and imagination and collaboration.
So how do you, in thinking about the way that people receive things, going back to your TEDx coaching, okay? I know you have likely had a client that hired you that was so dead set they were going to speak on this, and yet you, from your experience and being an outsider, because that's the beauty of having a coach, is they see things from different perspectives, see that this is not going to be the best that they can be. How do you overcome that and help them maybe become more curious, or listen, or transform what they think is the perfect idea into something that's way more impactful?
Yeah, I will start by kind of turning it into a game again. Well, let's take this idea and let's expand it a little bit, just to play, just to see if we can find different angles. Not that we have to use it at all, right? Like, because if you allow people to feel like there's freedom and there's space in it, and you can even think about it in like handing it to them in different ways. And so let me see if I can think of, like, for example, let's choose my idea. My idea is play. And now what if my idea was like, play is only good for adults who have this certain job. And like, that's what I came in for. And I'd say, okay, that's great. That's a really great idea. Let's think about all the other ways that play could be great as well, just to see if anything comes out of it. And like, there's these ways that you can expand things into areas that don't necessarily you wouldn't even think fit together, and just play around with like, okay, how many different ways can we think about play? How many different ways can we bring this to work? How many different ways, what other ways of our life can there be play? Can you do play while you're doing the dishes? Can you do play while you're in the shower? Can you do play? Like, if you just start throwing things out there, because
I'm now going to start thinking of every way I can do play.
Right, because the mind, the mind wants to play with you.
Yes.
So when you're talking to someone, and you just start putting these ideas out there, and like that it may feel like not theirs, a lot of people will lock in, but you can't stop your mind from thinking once you've planted seeds, right? And so once you start asking these questions, as humans, we want to answer questions. We want to answer them, right? We want to have the right answer. So I think this is a really great, leaders don't have all the answers, but leaders ask the best questions.
Yes. That is powerful. Yeah, I'm thinking about one of the things I love to do in brainstorming sessions, and this goes back to when I was at Georgia Tech, because we had these rooms that they were almost like small little closet type rooms, and all four walls were covered with the dry erase wallpaper stuff. And when we would do problem-based learning, then we would just throw every idea up on the wall. And as an executive in several of the companies that I've led, we do this. I'm like, look, no idea. I want the craziest idea, and we're just going to throw it. We're going to write everything up on the wall. And I've also done instances where I've bought like little magic wands and passed them out. I'm like, okay, now you guys all have a magic wand. So you have a magic wand. If you could do anything, what would you do? And it's so much fun to do those things, because when I've tried to do brainstorming sessions where we're coming up with a new idea and people have their limited beliefs and they're afraid to say something. But if you, as a leader, say, no idea is a bad idea. Like, I don't care. The crazier, the better. In fact, I've told people, I will give an award to the craziest idea.
Yes. Well, in that realm, some other things that are really great too, that we do with a lot of our play clients is we'll have them role play to the extreme worst of whatever it is.
Ooh.
Right? Like, we'll give them a scenario of like, let's say it's like a communication thing. Like, we'll make up a scenario and be like, well, you're playing, X and you're playing Y, and here's the scenario. And I want y'all to go all the way out on these characters and have fun with it because they're just like playing. But it will be like, take like a real life like situation, but it will be something like, X keeps drinking all the creamer in the fridge and Y never has creamer for their coffee, and like we'll set up something, you know what I'm saying? But it will be related to something that has to do with their job.
Right.
And then we'll give them a character of like, and it'll be like a extreme, like the most rudest, meanest, but not like saying bad things. But like, I don't want like just the person who's like, you always say no to everything, or you always do this.
The no people. Yes.
And we'll just give them roles to play. And they're like, and at first they're kind of like, what? But then people really get into like having fun and playing these roles. And then they start to see like, oh, you start to see the real things in it. And then when you like talk about it afterwards, you're like, well, what felt uncomfortable about playing that? Or what came up that has a bit of truth in it? And then people will start to talk about it because the real thing doesn't seem so bad then.
Right.
Right. Then you can get then you can talk about the real conflict. Or we'll say, let's play a game like Reese, put all the ideas on the wall. Like, what's the worst? I want the worst idea. I want the thing that you think would just destroy this. Because if you dump all the worst ideas out there, lots of times the good idea is buried in you trying to think of the worst ideas around the thing.
Right. Yes. You're dismissing it because you think it's a horrible idea. And then somebody else hears it and says, wait, that makes me curious about this.
Yes.
Let's maybe lean into this.
And it just turns your brain off. Like, we get in habits and patterns of thinking the same way. So it flips the switch on your brain a little bit, and then you have a little fun and you're laughing about it because it feels ridiculous. But then it's like, there's that little, that little spark that leads to something real.
When I was in residential treatment after my kidnapping, we had sessions that were play therapy, and they were role playing. And so I'm even thinking of that in the healing journey. I know that it's used in grief groups that are struggling from the loss of a child or a parent, or some of the gazillion different ways we talked about at the beginning of this episode for grief. And I would love if the listeners took nothing else from today, but just to be curious about how they can add more play to their life.
Yes. Add more play, and don't be afraid to use your voice.
Yes. I'm loving this. Okay. I want to know a couple of things that are on your bucket list that you've done, and a couple of things that are on your bucket list that you haven't done yet.
On my bucket list, well, taking a break from corporate was on my bucket list. I've done that.
Yes.
I think I went to a yoga retreat in Bali, which was on my list for a long time. I did that a few years ago, and it was just amazing. And yes, because it was in Bali, and yes, because it was yoga, but a lot of people talk about Bali. It's like this place to go. But what I took from it the most was they have this, they call it ceremony. And like, even when you go to like the restaurants or like you're in like the public places, they have like this flower offering, and they're always like doing gratitude. And like, you give gratitude before you do anything. And I really took that with me of like, are we really living in gratitude for this day? So that was a great bucket list thing. I also allowed myself to go on a fabulous writer's retreat because I love books, and I've loved writing since I was a kid, but I've always kind of put it to the side. I actually had thought I was going to like go to art school, but then I became a mom, and just like, I have to do the job society tells me to do.
Right.
I have to do, you have
this
to
is
go,
what I should do.
Go get the
Back to
401k job. Right. And so I got back to writing recently, and I went to a really great writing retreat.
You did that rather recently, right?
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
I did that, and it led to me getting a literary agent and like starting to really work on putting what I really want to put out into the world. So I think that's a bucket list in progress.
That's exciting.
What is on my list moving forward? Well, actually, I have, and it's a very short term, like very possible bucket list thing. Is once I did my first TEDx, I realized that I actually want to do a TEDx talk back at home where I grew up, because I want to go home and like give back to my community, and I wanted to do it in 2026 next year, because if my dad was alive, he died when I was very young, he would be 100 years old, and it just meant something to me. Yeah. So I'm working on that to be my next bucket list.
That's
thing.
Exciting. Yeah. That's exciting. Yeah. Are you ready for a couple of quick fire questions?
Yes.
Okay. What is a book or TV show or cartoon that has most inspired you?
Okay, I have a lot of books. I own really more. I own more books than anything. And I'll give you a little side story real quick. My son's now starting to get interested in a lot of the different types of books that I like to read. Of like, I started reading a long time ago, like Wayne Dyer and like Joe Dispenza and things like that. Okay. And so he's like, he's realizing like, Mom, we have a whole library in the house. Cause he's like, you have the books about this, you have books about this. Yeah. I was like, yes, I have books about everything, son. Like, get back to reading. But like, I think one of the books that popped in my head that I recommend everyone read is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. It's one of my favorite books. It's one of the books I reread. And for those who don't know, Elizabeth Gilbert is the woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. A lot of people know the movie and the book. But Big Magic is her book about her creative process. And there's one, and I'll do one spoiler in the book because I think it's so important. She talks about fear, and we talked about fear earlier.
Yes, yeah.
And she has a scene in the book where she's talking about like the metaphor of being in a car. And she says, like, I know that I need fear. Like, we need fear. There's a reason we have fear, because it's something that we need, and it's trying to help us. And she says, so I create space for my fear, but it has to sit in the back seat. It can't touch the radio, and it can never drive. And like that I keep that metaphor in my head around fear. It's like my favorite thing to make me think about how is fear controlling me in my life.
I love that. I love that. Okay. What is one leadership mantra or leadership style that you think should completely go away?
Command and control.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Your job as a leader is not to control people and tell them what to do. Your job is to have a vision and create environments where people can do their best work.
Amazing. Okay, if you could have dinner with anyone, past or present, who would it be?
My dad.
And why?
It would be my dad. Like, I used to think a lot about all these famous people. Like, I'd love to talk to like Maya Angelou and like these people who have these brilliant minds. But the older I get, because my dad died when I was so young, there's so much I don't know about him, and which means there's a lot I feel like I don't know about me. So my dad, he was born in 1926, because he said he'd be 100. But he was a black man who was born in the South in 1926. And I have these old photo albums. And there's a lot that we hear about what life was like in the South in the 20s and 30s. But that didn't seem to be his life. Like, I have his prom photos, and I have photos of him playing basketball, and like these old black and white photos. And he went to the Navy, and he became a pharmacist. And he had this amazing life. And his brothers all did great things. And so it's like my dad, and also my grandmother, probably because I'm named after her. She died before I was born. I have the exact same name as his mother. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, how did this woman black woman who was born in the South in the 1800s, raise these black men in a world that didn't want them to succeed?
Right.
And they all succeeded in a time when we still had Jim Crow. And like she was like, my grandfather on the census was listed as free man when there were still slaves. And so I'm fascinated to know my own story. If I could, that's who I would talk to.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. I love that. What piece of advice would you give your younger self?
Just keep going. Just keep going, because it's never going to be exactly how you think it's going to be. And even when you feel like you've made the wrong decision or you've made a mistake, like, just keep going, because you will see hindsight's way better than looking forward. But just keep going.
What's one of your favorite childhood memories that you have?
I was just talking about this last night, because I was with a woman who lives in Michigan. I grew up in Michigan, and I think my favorite childhood memory was every summer camping on Lake Michigan. And just like being outside, if if people haven't been to Michigan and they've never been on Lake Michigan, it's like being at the ocean, except there's nothing in it that can eat you. And it's not salty, right?
Yeah.
But there's like woods and sand and beach, and just as a kid being able to be in all of those elements and not realizing how nourishing it is to like have the sun and the sand and the trees and sleeping out under the stars and having real tents. We didn't do like bougie camping. We did straight up like tents, creepy outhouse that you had to go like shower and go to the bathroom in. But it was just I just wish as adults we would have moments like that where you're just being.
Yeah. What is one thing you would do or say to someone to encourage them to help them understand different cultures?
When you talk to people, don't look for the differences, like look for the similarities, because we all have a lot of differences, but as humans, we're very similar. Like, we all have the same fears. We're all afraid of like our loved ones getting hurt. We all have the same wants. We all want to just live a life and have a nice life, have food, be able to have these beautiful experiences. Like, when you really take away the differences and look for the similarities instead of the differences, you start to really see like, oh, we all really want the same things, but you have such different experiences. Maybe there's something I can learn from that.
I remember, and it was either when I was in Zambia or Mozambique, and I was in a village, and they separated the men and the women into different groups. So we were talking to the women and the men, and it was so funny. The women were asking us about how to solve these problems, and that were dealt with relationship with their husbands and stuff. I'm not going to call it the men in these villages, but it was amazing because we sat there and we're like, oh, we have the exact same problem.
That's the part. Like, the differences are made up.
Yes.
They're made up.
Yes.
They're made up by design to divide. And if we just look for what is similar, then we'll be able to find the connection.
Okay, I love this. So season 2 of the podcast is going to focus on badass humans. So can you tell me what is your definition of what a badass human is?
I think the number one trait of a badass human is kindness.
Oh, that's so powerful.
Kindness. I think we're missing so much of it. And if we all would just take a moment to be a little bit more kind, because we don't know what the other person is going through, we would see such a change in the world.
We totally would. Okay. A requirement of this podcast is that everyone has to share their favorite motivational quote. What is your favorite motivational quote?
Get your butterflies in formation.
Oh, tell me more.
So, and it's so great because my friend actually got me a plaque that said it, kind of how you have she just gave it to me recently. And so I heard this story, and I don't even remember where I first heard it, and I did martial arts for a long time with my son. So I'm a black belt in Taekwondo, so I like martial arts stories. And there's a story of a kid in it, whether it was their dad or their sensei or whatever, who was very nervous and about to go, do the next round of whatever. And what he said to her was, I know you're nervous and feel those butterflies, but get the butterflies in formation, like use them, put them to work for you.
That is so powerful.
Yeah.
You know what it made me think of is that I listen to Simon Sinek's podcast a lot, and he's referenced a couple of times about when he was interviewing athletes for one of the Olympics, I think the most recent Olympics. And he said what was really amazing is, he wasn't interviewing, he was just saying watching, and the news broadcasters were interviewing, and they would say, Corinne, were you nervous before you went and did your figure skating?
Yeah.
And he said athlete after athlete after athlete would say, no, I was excited.
Yeah. And
he said, just consider changing the idea instead of being nervous about going on stage to speak. If you, and the minute I heard it and him saying that, and I thought, wait, I'm excited to do that.
Yeah. The feeling's the same in your body.
Exactly.
It's the label we give it.
Yes. And it's the way that we interpret it. And it takes something like nervous, we interpret as fear. Excited, we interpret as fun. Like, I get to do this. And I think that's the thing, the way that we interpret the words we choose to describe our lives and our challenges and the things we do are really important.
And you just said another thing that I constantly use to reset my thinking is I get to. Instead of wake up like, I have to, oh gosh, I have to. It's like, no, I get to, because not everybody gets to. Not everybody woke up this morning, so I get to. Whatever it is, I get to do it, right?
Yeah, well, I'm glad that we got to have this. I wanted to be able to figure out how to say get to, but I'm glad we got to have this conversation today. Thank you so much. I enjoy you as a friend as well.
Ditto.
And the world needs to hear your story and needs to learn more about play. And I think it would be such a blessing if even one person who heard this added play into their life.
Yes.
And added communication and, more importantly, added kindness.
Yes. That's the perfect note to end on.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. I'm really grateful. Thanks for joining me for today's episode of the Badass Leaders Podcast. To hear more interviews with industry experts and learn how to grow your career and leadership potential, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to ensure you do not miss future episodes. This podcast is a production of the AGN Group. To learn more about the AGN Group, visit our website at theagnGroup.com. There, you can discover more about our services, which include hosting workshops, management consulting, brand strategy, keynote speaking, and more. Follow us on all social media channels shown on the screen and displayed in the show notes. And until next week, be brave and be badass.